We're here.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Welcome to this impromptu show for the Onyx Path Twitch channel. This is Storytellers with Coffee. Here's my coffee, and here are the Storytellers.
Coffee.
And we're here just to, hang out, chat, be nerds, talk about the challenges and delights of storytelling. And so I figure we should start off by introducing ourselves. I'll go first. My name is Rachel. I run Changeling the Dreaming on this channel. This is every Thursday from, I'm Pacific time, so I got to do some math. We run from 9:30 to 11:30 on Eastern time. And so let's start with Jess.
I always mute myself and then forget. I'm Jess. I run Paws and Claws, The Lost Tales of Pugmire every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern.
Uh, So how do we pronounce your name? Is it Karen, Corinne?
Bryn.
Corinne, okay. How about you? What are the shows that you run?
For Onyx Path, I run Purge of the Serpent Holds, which is a Scarred Lands show that I've written. That is 6 to 8 Eastern every Saturday. And that's what I do for Onyx Path. Other than that, I generally stream with Roll the Roll, where I'm a player and sometimes GM, DM, etc.
Neat. And last but not least, Chris.
I forgot I was muted. Sorry. I'm Chris, also known as a Primogen, and I run Changeling the Lost every Thursday here on the Onyx Path Twitch stream. It's called Little Brook Reunion, and we've been running for we've done about 22 episodes now. I think September last year. And aside from that, I have my own lore channel on YouTube. I do a bunch of World of Darkness lore videos, and I've also been running the occasional games on my channel as well. So that's where I usually hang out.
Neat. And so I've got a list of prepared questions, but those of you in chat, if you have something you want to ask, just drop it in and we will try and get to it. So the first question is, how did you get started storytelling? So, and I suppose we could just keep our order. Start with Jess.
Well, I really like fantasy. I've been playing in a few games for a little bit, and I was nervous, but I wanted to see if I could do it. So I started with something that I thought would be easy. It turns out it was quite complicated. It was Mouse Guard. But it was a great one to start with because it's so clear what you do. There's a sample adventure in there. And I was hooked from that point on. And then I kind of became an almost perma GM.
Neat. Corinne looks a little distracted now, so we're gonna skip ahead. Chris, how did you get started storytelling?
Well, I've been role playing for a while, and I always felt very nervous about running my own games. Like when I was younger, I would always have laughing fits because I got so nervous. So it took a long time for me to start running games more frequently. I would say that I got started doing things online because text-based role playing is more where I come from initially. And I would say, it's really hard to pin it down, but I would say that I started doing regularly over voice and camera stuff like that just a couple of years ago at most. Did some Dungeons and Dragons before I got back into World of Darkness. And I think Changeling the Lost is probably my longest running campaign that I've been doing over voice and camera. So that's that's saying a lot, actually, how little experience I have with that.
Well, I've heard a lot of good things about your game.
Thank you. It's very great. I have amazing players. They really work off each other so well. Makes my job super easy.
Yeah, I think we share a couple players.
I think so. Harry, right? got
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's amazing. He's amazing.
Okay, Corinne, how did you get started storytelling?
So for me, it's kind of roundabout. In general, I've been a kind of like a hobby writer for years, basically since I was young. And but I was pretty nervous to start running games and storytelling and GMing and DMing. But I became part of a streaming channel about a year ago. And at first I was just in games, but then we had some people who wanted to do a Weeby Goblins, which is a Pathfinder like module. Like it's really short, it's free. And it was decided that I would run it. And I'm like, I haven't run anything ever. Why are you deciding I'm running this? But it was just decided. I don't know. I had the right energy for it. And so, you know, I got some friends together. I ran it. I had a friend, Rin, who's in the chat, help run combat for me because I was very uncertain about combat and things like that. But after that, you know, I really liked it. I enjoyed it. And running that game is actually where Travis saw me run some of it, and he really enjoyed the way I ran it. So he approached me to run the Purge of the Serpent Holds game. So like I haven't been running games for that long. I mean, less than a year. But I think as a writer and as someone who just enjoys telling stories, I come to it a bit naturally. Because I don't know, I think it's just in a way it's something I've been doing for a long time, even though I haven't been actively doing it at a table for very long. So yeah.
Cool. I started playing D&D in school, and it was a long time ago. I remember using Thaco.
Oh, that is
my
a long
God.
time ago.
I am so sorry.
So my first GM DM experience was with D&D 3.0. Not 3.5, 3.0.
Oh my God.
And I think it says something about me that I still wanted to be a storyteller, game runner, even after that. And so we've got our first couple audience questions. Dr. Fusion asks, what one game is the one you've always wanted to run but haven't gotten to run yet, and why? Start with Jess.
Oh my gosh. I have so many games in my library that I haven't run. My RPG backlog is probably as long as my Steam backlog at this point. Off the top of my head, Basic Witches by Alicia Furness. Witch Fated Souls. That's a lot of witches. Shadows of Esteren. I love playing Symbaroom, but I haven't played it yet. I mean, I haven't run it yet. I love, same with Kobolds Ate My Baby. I love playing it, but I haven't gotten to run it yet, and I think that would be really fun with a bunch of friends. And
What's Kobolds Ate My Baby?
It's a really, I played it at Gen Con. It's basically, what do they call it? Like the beer and pretzels adventure game. And you're all kobolds, you're on a mission. You have like 2 or 3 stats. It's sort of, it's not laser, it's a very stripped down system. And you're basically going to wreak havoc everywhere you go for the glory of King Torg. All hail King Torg. And at the end of pretty much every game, you all die gloriously or disastrously, and it's really fun.
That does sound like a lot of fun. Okay, Corinne, how about you?
So Kobolds Ate My Babies is actually the one that I want to run and play in. I've only ever seen it be played. But I don't know. It seems ridiculously fun. And given that Weeby Goblins was the first thing I ever ran, I think it sounds great. It's very much in the same vein where it's ridiculous. But I love that you can die during character creation. which is yeah, you can die during character creation.
That was amazing.
Basically, when you're building your character, you roll to get like better stats or better stuff, and when you do that, you can die. If you roll poorly when you're rolling for that extra stuff, you just die. And you're like, well, I guess I start over making a new character because I died trying to get something besides like a spoon for my weapon.
We had a stack of character sheets at Gen Con.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the game I want to run just because it just seems like it's very much in the vein of something I would enjoy doing. And first I have to play it though. I've only ever seen it be played, but
Chris, how about you?
I want to say a game that I bought 15 years ago or so, which is called Furry Pirates, because it had amazing ship-to-ship combat. It was a really well-made game, but I don't really want to run that as much as I want to run Eclipse Phase, which is a game that I've been a huge fan of for a long time. It's essentially a very futuristic transhumanism focused game, which is also very Lovecraftian in its sense that it's all about trying to carry on living while you have this threat bigger than humanity looming just over you, waiting to kill you. The thing with Eclipse Phase that makes it so hard, at least for me to play, is the fact that the world is incredibly different from ours and very, very detailed. They put a lot of energy into making this transhumanism world very alive. There's different communities with different political beliefs. There's nano machinery that can make anything. So you have an economic system that's different from ours. You have everything is different. And you also have almost constant access to the times equivalent of the internet, which means that it's very, very hard to create a good, engaging scenario for this game that catches the players by surprise. So you have to really think outside the box. So I've tried to create. I've actually run it once. It didn't go well because.
Oh no.
Yeah, it's an amazing game, and I think it's more an issue of me rather than the game itself. And the second edition came out recently. I think they've made ways to make it more enjoyable. I'm sorry, that was the wrong way to say it. Easy to play, enjoyable to run as a storyteller. It is enjoyable. It's a great game. But that's the one I would love to play, run as a storyteller or game master, or what do you want to call it.
Neat. I have entertained this idea of running a podcast in which we study the history of tabletop RPG design by starting with original D&D and just playing through all the big titles that came out in sequence. But it's ambitious, and I suppose now that everybody's on quarantine time, I should buckle down and do that. Okay, so
that's actually something that we talked about on doing with Roll the Roll, like starting with like AD&D and then going forward, like doing each of the like editions, one session at a time. And then like if your character lives, the character continues on. If the character dies, you make a new one and keep going. Which you're almost certain to die in the beginning versions. But...
Oh my god.
So we should talk.
Yes.
That sounds amazing though.
Yeah. We hadn't actually tackled it yet, but that was something we were talking about doing.
If you're playing something from like back then, I really recommend Tunnels and Trolls. I've had so much fun playing Tunnels and Trolls.
I actually have like this whole Google document. It's a timeline of RPGs, and I realized pretty quickly we can't run all of them because D&D was just the first, and afterwards there was just an explosion.
Mm-hmm.
There was like 10 or 12 games a year, and so we'd only be able to get to the highlights. Like, this game is important because it's this is a Star Trek game and it's the first franchised game, and let's play it and find out. But yeah, let's talk after this. So we have another question from, I'm gonna guess it's pronounced Ryan Ryder. Which of you use the story guide system, and what do you love and hate about it the most? Story guide is the system used for Trinity and Scion and a lot of the newer Onyx Path games that are not Pugmire or World of Darkness. So, Jess, starting with you.
I don't use it. I just run Pugmire. And yeah, the only Onyx Path games that I've run have been Pugmire, Scarlands, and Changeling. So I am out for this question.
Okay. Corinne?
So I haven't run it, but I have seen it be run, and I think it has a lot of interesting things. I've yet to run with it, but I think one of the things that I'm still not sure how I feel about it is essentially the initiative system, like how initiative works in it. Because when you're running a game with it, if I understand correctly, you each time, like whoever goes next, like in a combat or in a scenario, basically the player who was last, like most recent, picks the next person. And I think that has like interesting connotations, but I don't know how I feel about it yet. So like I can't decide whether I like it or don't like it. I think I would have to run personally to see how it feels. But I think that's one of the more interesting things about it that I'm iffy about. Like I don't know how I feel about it yet, probably because I haven't actually run with it. But yeah.
When I played 7th Sea, my GM did something like that, but I don't know if that was just like his table rule or if that's actually something you do in 7th Sea.
No idea.
Chris, how about you?
I haven't been able to play neither Trinity nor Scion lately. I played Scion a long time ago when it was still a White Wolf product. Has the system changed since then? I would assume so. Because that was...
I don't know. Yeah, I assume it's
Yeah.
changed.
And Trinity, I have like a very old edition of it, which was like this tiny version of the book. So I can't really say that I played it too much. I am really, really bad with systems in general. I never remember rules, and it messes me up that I play Old World of Darkness, I play Chronicles of Darkness games, and I play V5 as well, and they're all like slightly different from each other in certain ways, and it always gets to me every time I play. So I would love to play Scion though. Scion is an amazing game. I enjoyed it a lot when I played it before.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat with the rest of you in that I've never run a story guide system game. I've played in it. My fiance is running a Trinity Aeon game because that's his favorite game of all time. Uh, I suppose what I don't like about it is sort of what Chris mentioned in that it's similar to the Storyteller system, but different in very detailed and finicky ways. Uh, and I'm a grognard, and I'm used to like, wait, no, it works this way. So, I just have to sort of get over that. Yeah, and I'm the same with Corinne. I don't know how I feel about that initiative. It is nice to sort of have a collaborative initiative because, playing D&D, there's so many times in which, really cool tactic is just borked by people's initiative rolls.
Oh, so much.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I like different rules for initiative very much. I know Wrath and Glory, the new Warhammer 40k game, has it going like, okay, one player, you choose which one of you starts. Then one of the enemies go, and then another player chooses who to like continue. So I think that's a really good system. It allows for more team collaboration, cooperation, which I think is like what you're saying is better. It's better than a static system, I think.
Yeah, anything that lets players like think creatively and use tactics to come up with a way to defeat all of the nasties that I'm throwing at them, I appreciate.
Oh yeah.
Neat. So, since this is Storytellers with Coffee, I thought I'd ask what's your favorite type of coffee? Or what you drinking? Jess.
I like a good dark roast. I'm currently drinking garbage coffee because we've been buying in bulk because of the pandemic. But if you follow me on Twitter, you'll see that yesterday we tried to make whipped coffee using not instant coffee because we were like, we'll use good coffee for it, and don't do that.
What is whipped coffee?
It's this thing that's been going. It's apparently, I think it's Korean. It's Asian coffee, but I guess Good Morning America just discovered it, and a lot of my friends were like, "Look at this beautiful coffee, and it looks so good." It's just equal parts instant coffee, sugar, and either hot or cold water and milk, and you whip it for 5 minutes, and it looks beautiful. But you need the instant coffee to dissolve in it because regular coffee grounds just sit there, and it's gross. So yeah, I'm drinking a dark roast that came in a massive bag. But if I had my druthers, I would be drinking a coconut milk cappuccino right now.
That sounds good. Corinne, your coffee.
So currently right now I'm actually drinking tea. I have a tea that's called Princess Power Up. From it's from a basically like D&D and fantasy themed tea shop that is in, I think, Woodstock, Illinois, called Casting Whimsy. They have like all sorts of fun teas, and if you like tea, try it out. Like, because this is delicious. It's like spiced peach, and it's probably one of the best teas I've ever tasted. But in general, for coffee, I like light roasts. I don't know. I'm a light roast person, but I find myself drinking more tea than I do coffee because coffee is kind of hard on my stomach. Yeah.
Chris, how about you?
Well, my wife is going to kill me if I don't say mocha pot espresso, which is what the only thing we drink at home right now. She's from Slovenia, so we have to drink. We import it from Slovenia, actually, the coffee. I don't remember the name of the brand, but it's a dark roast. It's an espresso, so it's supposed to be very strong. But my personal favorite is actually it's gonna be drip coffee that's been standing for a while and really like soaking in there. My dad was a carpenter, so I always drank that with him in the morning. So it's very nostalgic. Even worse is the percolated coffee because that tastes like garbage. But that's the only flavor I can remember when I was thinking of coffee. Like, I remember that taste. It's terrible, but it's familiar. I'm not a connoisseur in coffee. I will drink pretty much anything that has caffeine in it. But I would say that mocha pot coffee, like it has the rich flavor. There's just so little of it. I have nothing left. This is how much coffee I will get with the mocha pot. It is nothing, and I'm used to drinking cups this big. So,
yeah. Are you supposed to like fill it the rest of the way up with milk or something?
We go about halfway with milk. Okay. We use oat milk right now because it's sweeter. It gives it more flavor.
I love it.
Oh, I love oat milk. I tried it for the first time like a week ago because I'm basically lactose intolerant.
Same. So good.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to say
right away.
If you've never done like a one of these, a pour over, it makes such good coffee.
Yes.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Although
do pour over.
When I worked at a coffee shop, I hated doing pour overs.
Oh, me too. It was the worst. It just took so much time. But if you're making it for yourself, a pour over is great. It really makes a very tasty coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tried pour over and I wasn't a fan. I don't know if they did it properly, but
they might not have done it right.
Maybe it's a bad grind, but like it brought out all the parts of coffee that I dislike and like muted the parts I like. So even though I'm on the West Coast, my fiance is from Massachusetts, and visiting his family regularly, I fell in love with Dunkin' Donuts. And so I pick up
Wait,
Dunkin'
do you not
Donuts.
have that on the West Coast?
It just they just arrived here within the last year or so.
Okay.
And there's only like 2 or 3 locations, and none of them are super accessible from where I am. So I get the Dunkin' Donuts coffee from the grocery store, and I just make that at home in my drip maker, and that's good for me.
I'm actually I'm in the neighborhood. I almost said how close I am and realized that that's how people find my house and murder me. I'm in the neighborhood of I think the only kosher Dunkin' Donuts in my city.
Ooh.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah, it's because I'm in a super Jewish neighborhood. So
I mean, that makes sense.
That's great though. That
yeah,
do that.
all the meat is actually vegetarian, and they don't advertise that because they make a lot of meat and cheese sandwiches.
I'm in a heavily like Middle Eastern neighborhood is right near me, and so I can get a lot of really good Turkish coffee.
I love Turkish coffee.
Yeah.
It is so good.
Thai coffee is really good.
Yes, that too.
Yeah.
Mm.
Usually when I'm out and about, I actually get chai lattes instead, because I often drink so much coffee at work. So whenever I'm out meeting friends, I'm like, chai lattes. They're so difficult to make for myself. So that's what I usually get. I like sweet stuff, so it's.
I love a good like dirty chai latte.
Yes.
It's really good.
My so I used to have to sing Holiday Pops concerts, which is about 25 Christmas concerts with the orchestra in 3 weeks. And so I got through that with a lot of dirty chai lattes with rum chata and rum added to my dirty chai latte, and just like knocking those back right before we went on stage.
That sounds so decadent.
It was so good.
That sounds delicious.
Oh man.
Or peppermint hot chocolate, or hot chocolates with rumple mints in them.
Yeah. We've got a question if we've ever tried bullet coffee, which is coffee with butter in it.
I haven't, but my partner has, and really
Coffee
Yeah.
with what?
Heard of it.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like a miracle coffee, where like you put the butter in it, and that is like the fat is supposed to give you extra energy for the day.
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh no, I did try it.
Yeah.
Back when my husband and I got engaged, we went and visited his grandfather in Connecticut, and his grandfather's been doing this for like his entire life, and he gave us coffee with butter in it. And we're like, and at least I was like, oh, okay. I don't remember it at all, but I did drink it.
That is so cool.
Yeah. I was very confused at the time because it was before this became a thing people were talking about.
It's a high caloric coffee drink. That's
Yeah.
weird.
Yeah.
I mean, on the other hand, my
Or
dad
high
was
fat
Finnish.
coffee drink.
Yeah, my dad was Finnish,
Yeah.
so we have coffee cheese, which is like this cheese made. I think it's made out of reindeer milk. I'm not entirely sure, but it has this kind of what do you call it? Like a texture that's kind of like halloumi, if you know that cheese.
Mm-hmm.
Like squeaky, and you put it in coffee and you let it kind of be there for a while, and then you eat it, and it's absolutely amazing.
That sounds great.
Yeah.
Well, apparently we're supposed to put it in a blender so it gets frothy, which is
Ah.
probably the mistake that I've made, because I just
Yeah.
like dropped a little pat of butter in there, and I'm like, this is not as miraculous as people are telling me it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I bet you're supposed to use unsalted butter too, which
I do a
Mm.
lot of cooking from scratch, so all the butter we have is unsalted.
yeah, my partner used salted butter and was like, well, you put milk in your coffee, so I mean it's just like that, but a little oily.
And salty.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm content with half and half.
Who doesn't want some oily, salty coffee? Am I right?
I mean, in these trying times.
I mean, I'm not at a Denny's. I have standards.
I feel like I'm back at when I worked at the store with the green aprons, where our district manager would come in and have us do a coffee tasting, and we had to describe like intimately how these terrible black coffees tasted, and my boss was like, if you say any of them taste like dirt, you are fired today. So you had to be like, the Sumatra is an earthy roast with hints of cedar and musk.
I very briefly worked at a Target Starbucks,
Mhm.
so like the ones that are inside Target, because I worked at Target, and
oh
then
yeah,
like
like
they train
unofficial
basically,
ones.
yeah, they train basically anybody who's like, yeah, I guess I can do coffee,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I had to do like the pour overs for the first time, and I'm like, I'm not doing this right at all. I feel bad for anyone who comes here looking for a pour over, and if like the one person who actually knew how to do it right wasn't there. I'm a stalker. I do produce, but here I am.
Okay, so switching back to storytelling.
All right, yeah.
We can leave Coffee Bee for now.
Yeah, we might circle back. So, anyway, all of us, we run games online for the viewing pleasure of our audiences. And I assume, and so as a storyteller, what are the differences that you see between meat-based games and online games, especially when you know that your online game has an audience? So, starting with Jess.
I'll talk about one of the big things because it's kind of a hot issue going around right now is that it's a lot harder for players if something is triggering for them to play an X card in front of an audience because they don't want to interrupt the flow of the game. So even if you check in with a player, like in your Zoom chat or whatever, they're more likely just to say like, no, it's fine, when actually they're not fine. So checking in with them after the fact, I think, in doing a decompression session after gaming is even more important with a streamed game because you get in this attitude of like, this show must go on.
Yes.
And also with a streamed game, there is kind of a disconnect between some players who are like, I'm playing a game and I'm having fun and I'm doing a thing for me, and other people who, other players who are like, we are doing a show, we are going to go with what the show does. And so getting everybody on that same page of like, this isn't a home game, this is a show, or this is a show where we do nonsense, and just working out like what you want the focus to be, because otherwise there's going to be some tension and nobody likes to watch that or play with that.
Corinne, how about you?
I would say, yeah, I think that's definitely one of the big differences is you do, in a sense, have to be more careful. And you have to make sure that you're really open with your players and hope they can be open with you as well, because there is that disconnect between being with the screen instead of being in person with someone. It's harder to read body cues and things like that, especially in the heat of the moment. I would say, though, on a positive note for running online and even streaming at the same time, I feel that it's a lot easier to keep a game together versus with a home game or an in-person game where life gets in the way a lot, and because people aren't necessarily as not beholden's kind of a weird word, but like dedicated to that schedule, and knowing that there's people who are going to watch this, I think it's easier. Yeah, it's an obligation. It's a fun obligation, but it's an obligation. So it's a lot easier to kind of keep a game together. I've had a lot more luck keeping online and streamed games together than I have just normal games, because there's that set schedule. There is like, hey, we do this every Saturday, and the reason we do it is because people are going to watch us. And I think that's a benefit that you get from doing a stream, is that it's a lot easier to keep that schedule. Even if you only have 2 people watching you, you know, those 2 people expect you to go on. And if you don't, you know, it's, I think people are less likely to cancel or drop out, is my feeling.
Yeah. Chris, how about you?
Yeah, that's been my experience as well, that people really find the time to show up for these games, and it's very unusual for anyone to drop out. I am running a game with 6 players right now on camera, and one thing I noticed almost immediately after I started doing this regularly is that my the pressure I felt on myself for storytelling games with my friends in outside of on camera or doing it off, you know, not actual playing. Sorry, cat is screaming in the background. Was that I felt such less pressure running games that weren't being a show as well. So that was a huge plus. But also I agree that it is so important to check in with the players, how they're doing. Like, I'm playing Changeling the Lost, running Changeling the Lost, which is a very trauma-focused game. It can get very personal, it can get very dark. I don't think my game has gotten close to that yet, and that has been a conscious decision of mine, because I'm very worried about pushing things, especially since a lot of my players are not people I have known for a long time. They're fairly new friends of mine. And I think that I really don't have anything to contribute, because you guys said all really good things. But
we've got a question for you from After Dragons. Do you find it hard to share the light with all 6 players?
I feel like there's been times where I've been running most of the episode, and there's been times where I've been sitting for 40 minutes just taking it in. And I think that's a good mix. My players are amazing because they started working off each other right away. They have very different play styles, but I've been blessed with a group that has a good dynamic almost from the beginning, and it just keeps getting better. But absolutely, I think at times I've been worried one player has been quiet for a while, or one player has looked like maybe distracted, and I've tried to check in with them after, like, hey, are you okay with the session? Was there something on your mind? Did you feel like you got enough to do during the session? Inevitably, a group that big, it's very, very hard to have everyone have their time in the spotlight for every episode. But since we're doing things weekly, sometimes it's easier to just be like, all right, this was a very this character centric episode. Next time we'll do more of a group thing, or we'll focus on another or two player characters. It's 2-hour episodes too, so there's only so much you can do in 2 hours, I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
6-player game too, and it's pretty much the same.
Well,
Yeah,
and
I-
that's oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that's actually something where my players and we might actually be starting earlier soon to give an extra hour, because we only have 5 players, but working in the 2 hours, even with 5 players, is kind of hard, especially as they've gotten more used to each other and like they are role playing more. They are like doing little like vignettes and like having moments that I don't want to interrupt, because I'm like, do the thing, have fun. Build your character. I don't want to stop you to make you do a story thing. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
go in.
Yeah,
But we spent like 5 episodes working on the same thing because they kept getting distracted. And I'm like, well, they're having fun. I guess that's just what we're doing.
yeah,
Yeah,
and that
yeah.
sort of goes in with my view on like the most challenging part of running games online, before an audience or not, is that when you're playing at a table and you've got 6 players, around your kitchen table, it's really easy for like 2 or 3 of them to sort of peel off onto their own little scene.
Mhm.
And that's a lot more difficult in an online game where,
For sure.
everybody, we can only have one person talking at a time, and it's really hard to do those side scenes. And so for that reason, I like to keep my online games smaller than what I'd run in Meat Space. My Changeling game right now is 4 people, and we've got a really good dynamic. I would probably only want to add in one more regular player, because I've had guest stars show up. I've had a couple Changeling canon characters show up in their earliest forms. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Surprise! He was or it was mage all along.
Nice.
Yeah, with a guest star it's different because it's only for 1 or 2 sessions.
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like small groups online make for a better dynamic.
That's especially true depending on the amount of time you have as well. Like, it does get hard to manage 5-6 players when you're working in a very small time frame.
Yeah.
Just because it's hard to get anything done. I mean, you can have a great session, but by the time you get to the end of it, you're like, well, we did about a quarter of what we actually wanted to do this session.
Yeah.
I guess it's going to the next one, which is fine, but it's very much just like, we just spent like an hour shopping and encountering random shopkeepers because you like me making voices. Okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I'll keep doing that.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be Minnesotan for you. That's fine.
Yeah, my Pugmire game is 6 players, and my 3 Flings game that I play on my own channel is it's 3 tieflings. It's 3 Flings.
Oh,
and
that's
it's,
cute.
That sounds like fun.
It's a very different dynamic between that. But on the other hand, like, if somebody's missing from Paws and Claws and I don't have time to get a guest to fill in, like, that's fine. Running a game with like 5 or 4, if we're down somebody due to illness or family emergency, is fine. If we're missing a tiefling and I can't get a guest, like, we always have a serious debate, or not debate, but discussion over, like, do we cancel tonight? Do we cancel the show? Like, how much do we want to go out there with just 2 players? Because a 2-player game is fine at home, but in front of an audience, how much do they want to watch that?
Yeah, and you don't want to get too far in like a streamed game without that player when you only have, the 3.
Yeah.
I feel
Yeah.
like sorry.
Oh, just I encountered that with my Changeling game just last week, because 2 players were down with sickness, which only left me 2 more players. And I like to run really fast-paced games, and so I don't want half my players to miss out on stuff. But I also don't want there to be no content, which is part of the whole performative aspect. So I grabbed a friend of mine who is a storyteller for a LARP of the tabletop version of the game I'm running. And we just like, all right, let's just hang out and talk about changelings for 2 hours.
And I feel that's like it really depends on what kind of story you're telling. Really, like if it's fast paced, and I've discovered in my game, which I intended to be a slow burn, what was a lot more fast paced than I imagined. It's really it's so much information every session that a player who's missing will have to relearn, which is definitely our responsibility. At least poking the players to be like, hey, maybe you should like clue them in on what's going on. But I feel like I've been running things at high gear for such a long time that now at this point, like maybe 15 16 episodes in, at that point I could start taking a step back and be like, all right, now they've been through so much, these characters together and the players, that they're familiar and comfortable with each other to have this kind of to discuss matters, because they've been just heaped with issues every session. And now I'm like, all right, I gotta slow things down a little bit for them to start deciding what they want to do. And it's a difficult balance. I think one of the biggest problems is, like you mentioned really early on, is this a show or is this a game? Because if it's a show, there needs to be a certain amount of fluidity in the story. Not necessarily, of course, but a lot of people watching might not be okay with like 2 hours of slow burn talking about what are we going to do now. But that is such a big part of role playing that you kind of also have to have that in. It's such a difficult balance for it.
Yeah, and for me, I'm running a game that most people are only vaguely aware of, because everybody knows the Changeling, the Dreaming. Like, oh yeah, that's one of their games. It's about what, fairies, kid fairies. Aww.
Yeah.
But as I've grown older and become a bitter, disillusioned adult, I look back on Changeling and the Dreaming, and I'm like, oh, this game is actually really cool.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see part of my job as the storyteller running a show about Changeling the Dreaming to sort of present the audience with, this is what this game is actually about, and sort of, teach by demonstration. This is how the game is played. And I have 2 players who are very, very, very new to role playing in general. One of them has only ever played D&D before this, and so whole new system, whole new setting. And I'm actually really grateful to have her, because she will ask a lot of questions, and I'm like, oh yes, let me answer this question for you and the audience.
That's something that I really love is, if you have a player who's new, or, people in chat even who ask the right questions, like the questions that you can help them understand, like what's going on here, how you do this, especially with a newer system, or even just, a setting that someone's unsure about. I get that a lot with Scarred Lands when we were playing our Sunday game, the one on my home channel, where we would have people asking questions about the setting, or even players themselves being like, hey, I don't understand this. What does this mean in this setting? And I think that's really helpful to be informative in that sense, and to engage like that, because it helps everybody understand more. And having a player that's new to a setting or a system is really helpful, because it gets you to answer the questions that you may know this, but somebody else might not. And if you don't know it, you can always look it up and be like, great question.
Yeah,
let me find that answer.
Yeah, we have a lot of that. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I feel like doing it that way makes it more accessible to the audience, which is always a good thing.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have a lot of that on Paws and Claws, because Pugmire's so similar to D&D, but where it's different, it's very different. So a lot of times where players are kind of like, wait, what do I roll for this? What is this ability that I'm using? And for me, especially running a D&D game and a Pugmire game in the same week, I hope it's nice for the audience to know that we can get confused too.
Yeah. So after that very detailed question, here's a bit of a simpler one. Do you prefer storytelling or being a player? So, Jess, how about you?
I guess storytelling, since I do it all the time. um, I think I do prefer storytelling because I've had, I love being a player when I have a really good storyteller or GM or DM that I can trust. But part of the reason that I got, not the only reason, but part of the reason that I got into being a storyteller, and I didn't want to bring this up at the beginning because it's unpleasant, was because I had some really negative experiences as a player with like safety reasons with storytellers. And I know that if I'm the storyteller, that won't happen in my game. So having that little modicum of control and knowing that I get to set the tone and make sure that everyone is safe at my game is important for me. Though I really like to, relax and chill and be a player every so often.
Corinne.
I think for me, I enjoy both for different reasons. And it really depends on the mood that I'm in. I kind of have to psych myself up a little bit to run a game because it takes a lot from me, like emotionally and mentally. Like I have pretty bad ADD, so like focusing in and being like, I need to run this game. I have to pay attention for 2 to 4 hours is it's a lot. So like I have to be prepared for that. And I love telling that story. I love being the one to like open up that world for my players. So it's very rewarding, but it's something that I can't do all the time because if I'm doing it constantly, I know I'm going to lose the flair for it, the passion I have for it, and I'll get just bogged down and tired. So I feel like doing the storytelling is a lot of work for me, just personally. And I think it is for everybody, but in different ways. But playing in a game, it's sometimes you can kind of just show up, be there, be in the moment. And I think it really depends on the mood I'm in at the time, on which I prefer. I'd say today I'm feeling like I have the energy to be a storyteller, but maybe not tomorrow. We'll see. But
And how about you, Chris?
It's really difficult. Like Jess was saying, I feel like if I create the scenario, it's easier for me to have the kind of content that I'm both comfortable with and familiar with, so I can perform well. I really love being a player, and in real life, I've mostly played rather than run a game myself. I still guess I would have to say storyteller because there's just something about the players' reactions when we're playing, and like I was storytelling a game or game mastering a game of Cult rather than in this weekend at the Virtual HorrorCon, and just I paused for a moment and I thought these players whom I have never met are talking about characters that I created. And discussing their motivations and discussing what they are going to do in a scenario that I created. It is, in a sense, kind of weird and very satisfying because it to me, it is very important that everyone is having a good time. And if I can do my best as a storyteller, I believe I have more power than a player does. The player still has the responsibility, of course, in the group. But I feel like as a storyteller, if I can run a game where everyone is smiling at the end or like have had a good time, that is such a huge boost to me. I still have a lot of issues. Like every time I'm supposed to run a game, I get extremely nervous. I get stomach aches and I feel sick to my stomach because I have a couple of experiences in the past where things were not good when I ran games. So any opportunity I have to present to have people have a good time for 2 hours, and saying thank you to everyone playing afterwards is, yeah, being a player, it's hard to hit that notes. Of course, if you have good dynamics, you can, but as a storyteller, it's very satisfying. Long answer, but sorry.
Yeah, no, it was a really good one. Uh, yeah, I get that pre-game nervousness. Uh, and I kind of welcome it because that is what pushes me to do the best job that I can. And I feel like I'm a storyteller by nature just because when I pick up a new book and I'm flipping through it and I'm reading the setting and I'm reading the rules, the ideas that come to me are not characters that I could play, but stories that I could run.
Oh yeah, I agree.
Yeah. And so it is really, really challenging, but I find it a lot more creatively rewarding to be a storyteller.
I think the being able to run and like at the start of the session, like seeing the difference in your players after you've run the session is something that is amazing that you really don't get when you are just a player. Like it's your players start off in one mood, and if you've done your job in the end, they're all like happy and gushing or like really invested in the thing you've done. And I think that's something that you don't get in a lot of other mediums. Like you get that like immediate response to the thing you've done. And I think that's one of the really big draws of being a storyteller is, you get that immediate reaction from your players. You get to the end and, maybe you had a couple players who were kind of down when you started, and you get to the end and they're like happy and smiling and engaging. And you're like, I did it. I did my job. I had that recently because, everybody's stressed out now with everything going on. And, I have some players who have, some really personal things happening. And then, we got to the end of our Purge of the Serpent Hole session and everybody was happy and smiling and laughing and engaged. And it was like, I did that. I helped them forget, for a couple hours and be involved in something else. And I think that's a really like powerfully good feeling.
Definitely.
Yeah, my favorite thing to hear after a session is when a player just is like, thank you, I really needed that today.
Yeah. I think that's like one of the best reactions you can get.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Amateur therapists of the world unite.
Exactly.
So we've got another question from the chat. This is from Deacon Ket. Hello, storytellers, first time caller, long time player. I find it difficult to find good dynamic players used to the paradigm. Any suggestions? So, Jess, how about you?
I'm wondering what the paradigm in question is.
Yeah, I'm guessing by, and feel free to chime in here, Deacon Ket, if we get this wrong. My thought was someone used to the setting,
Okay.
and I guess sort of the narrative assumptions of if you sit down to play this game, this is the sort of story you're looking for.
Got it. So I'm a really lax GM. I feel like I always have a session 0 with my players, and sometimes if it's been a long game, have one like midway through as well, just to refresh, make sure everybody's on the same page and talk to them. So in, I guess, establishing the paradigm would be happening then. Like, this is what kind of game do we want to play? There's a game called Threadbare that I love that starts out asking, do you want, you're all toys in a post-apocalyptic world, and it says, do you want to play this game scruffy, toughy, or dented? Which is
I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good measure. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of stole that for my own Squad Goals game, where I said, do you want to play this Super Friends, Justice League, or Snyderverse? And so it's like determining, this is what the world we're going to play in is. What do you want to bring to it? And how are we going to collaborate, kind of thing? What kind of thing are we going to bring together? And then I guess if a player is not bringing that or not sticking to it, then that's when we kind of need to talk to that one player and be like, hey, do you still, like, is this still for you? Do you still want to play? Is what's going on with the situation?
Riffing on that scruffy, toughy, and dented, when I was starting up my Changeling game, I described Seelie as Disney and Unseelie as Brothers Grimm.
Good.
I
Good.
love
like
that.
that.
Yeah.
That's good.
So Corinne, what are your insights on finding players used to the paradigm?
I would say for me, it's a lot about telling them who you are as a storyteller when you start. Like, what kind of stories do you tell? What kind of story is this going to be? Like, very much setting up, what they can expect and getting input back on that. Specifically letting them know right out of the gate, like, hey, this is the kind of story I'm planning. Are you okay with that? And making sure that the players you get are looking for the same kind of story that you're bringing, because otherwise, that's where you get unhappy players or players who are going the opposite. And that can totally change as you go. Like, your story may change, it may evolve, and you need to check in, as you said, sometimes do a second session 0 midway through to be like, hey, how's everybody feeling? Anything you don't like? Anything, has your mood changed? And I think, it's all about communication in that sense. I think I'm a very irreverent storyteller. Even when I'm, even if I'm tackling something that may be scary, I like to find the humor or the absurdity in it. Because even, humor and absurdity is how humanity in general deals with scary things. And I like to bring that to my stories, and I have to make sure my players are okay with that tone, because I'm never going to take anything too seriously. It'll be serious when it needs to be. But then you end up with somebody riding a zebra. I don't know. Like, it just happens because of reverence in the face of danger is something that I'm very prone to doing, because it's, I feel it's the way that we as people respond to things that are scary.
Yeah. How about you, Chris?
I think the fish out of water trope is very, 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 very common in World of Darkness games, because it's the easiest way to introduce someone to the setting. Take vampire. You're a recently embraced vampire. You've been thrown before the prince, and he's going to give you something to do, or they're going to give you something to do, or she is, depending whoever the prince is, and kick it off from there. But I think, like you guys brought up earlier, the session 0 is super important, because everyone knows about vampires, so everybody knows about werewolves, but World of Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, slightly different take on it. You gotta be honest and open about it. I feel like something I always had trouble with early on was that I wanted to keep things secret to surprise players. And I think in a certain extent that can be useful, but I also think that it's much better if the players can kind of guess what's coming. Because it gives them something to act off on. I don't want things to be completely unknown, because then the player's reaction is super unpredictable, and the impact that you were planning for might not happen because they don't know about this phenomena, or they're not aware of the grand scale of this. So I think communication is always the key. I think the more the players know, usually the better, as long as they don't know exactly what you're planning to do. And I think that you don't have to be an expert, especially if you're running a game off camera. The players don't need to know anything. If they're like, I want to talk to the person in charge, you'd be like, okay, so here's the people who are in charge in this order. It's fine. You don't have to have an encyclopedic knowledge of any of this to be able to play vampire well. I think I played a short campaign, Chicago Stories, on my channel, and I had Hadi Bonschland playing, and she's very familiar with Vampire the Masquerade, but has never role-played before. Did an amazing job with it. I know Erika Ishii on LA by Night didn't read anything before she started playing, because she wanted to be a newly embraced vampire. Has done an amazing job. I think we often think that the setting is much more difficult than it has to be. And I think we want to keep secrets close to our heart, because we remember the first time we read about them and we were so excited about it. So it's fine. You can still create this emotion through role playing. That's what we're doing. So be more open about things.
Yeah.
Long answer again, but that's my opinion.
Well, that's fine, because my answer is going to be a bit long too. How to find good dynamic players used to the paradigm? My answer is make them. Uh, not force them, but
No.
create them.
Yeah.
Because I think that we all agree that there's a certain skill set that you need to be a good storyteller. There's a similar skill set that you need to be a good player, to sort of be able to, pass the plot ball back and forth, and how to pick up on narrative clues, and just how to know what questions to ask. Like,
Yeah.
can I roll investigate right now? And I feel that, like any skill, that can be taught. And we're in a really good, excuse me, we're in a really good place right now in gaming in general, I think, because there was a really long dry period. Uh, I'm just gonna say that it corresponded with D&D 4th edition. I'm not gonna blame 4th edition for that. Um,
I agree.
but
There was a
I
time
think you can blame 4th edition. It's okay.
I think we all.
I
Yeah.
mean, you know, but anyway.
Yeah, there was a huge dry spell. I agree with you completely.
Yeah,
Like it went
uh,
from the shelves were full of games to like 3 games.
yeah,
I don't
and
know what else to
then
say. Yeah.
they came out with 5th edition. That's been super popular, and I think that really Twitch and streaming games have had a huge impact on it,
Mhm.
because people are watching Critical Role, and they're watching LA by Night and these blockbuster shows, and and they look at people having fun role playing, getting into this really cool hobby, and they want to do it too. And so this is our moment to go find these people, and teach them. Because I was in a vampire LARP. Oh, started about 4 years ago. It ran for about 2 years. And so I was playing Vampire LARP in like the early aughts, and I loved it. I had a great time. Uh, and then all the games in my area just sort of faded away. And so when this new one was starting up, I was like, yes, cool. And I was just expecting the game to be people like me who had played in the late 90s and early aughts, and they're coming back for the nostalgia. And it really surprised me when we got so many players who had never role played before. They'd never played World of Darkness before, but they'd heard of this and they wanted to come play. And it just demonstrated to me that there are a lot of people out there who do want to learn how to play and who do want to get involved in this. And all we have to do is find them and bring them into the fold. And so that is my very long answer to that
That was a
question.
perfect answer. I agree absolutely. I'm so happy that streaming is such an available tool right now. It wasn't back in 2005, 2006, around the time when 4th edition was going on. I
Yeah.
think yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. It just kind of reminds me like one of us.
Google Gabble.
Just bring them in, make them
Yeah.
sign the contract.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
And I think
it also
it's-
shows so easy. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it also shows that it's so easy to play.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important that, if you're looking for players, like, not every player is suited to every game, kind of thing. So, if you're not finding players that are suited to the game that you want to play, but you really like certain players, like, see what they want to play, see what they're interested in. Like, maybe you're trying to have them play Vampire the Masquerade, and they really want to play something like light. Not everybody wants to play a dark game. It's been absurdly easy to get guests for Paws and Claws just because I can go up to anybody and say, hey, you know how to play D&D. Have you ever wanted to be a dog or a cat in D&D? And everybody comes with like this preconceived character of like, oh yes, I want to be my dog, or I want to be like this dark backstory cat kind of thing. And yeah, there's just sometimes you want to goof off and sometimes you want to explore the darkness of humanity and just find players that suit the game and play games that suit you.
Yeah, I've noticed that about Pugmire, is that everybody wants to play their pet.
And it's funny because it can be a really dark, bleak game. Like the first season of Paws and Claws, we were dealing with like xenophobia and isolationism and the Meowfia and corrupt politicians, but it's still like kind of a light-hearted, you know, we wouldn't call it family friendly because we swear a lot on that game, but you know, there's like murder and mayhem, but at the end of the day everybody is like a curious cat or a good dog.
Yeah, and you sort of hit on something that reminded me of another point I wanted to make, is that, like, yeah, when you sit down to a vampire game, you know roughly what it's going to be about. But even within the paradigm of vampire, there's a lot of nuance there. So do you all, like, is this going to be a game about neonates struggling to hold on to their mortal lives and their humanity against this backdrop of horror? Or are we playing elders, who their struggle is similar but, different in very interesting ways? And same thing with a D&D game, or with even a Wraith game. Wraith is super bleak, but even within there, you can be like, are we working for the man? Are we resisting the man? Are we, going to off and do our own thing? And so even when you say, hey, let's run a vampire game, let's run a werewolf game, let's run a Paws and Claws game, you still have to sit down with your players and be like, this is the aspect of this game that we're going to explore here.
Yeah, oh yeah, for sure. And on that topic, I feel like a lot of times I've seen very, very advanced, very well worked out hacks for Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. Like, I want to run a game in this setting, so I've hacked and changed Dungeons and Dragons to suit that, which I think it's impressive, amazing, but also there are so many games these days, almost too many games right now. I'm a little scared about the market going like how it did in 2004. But like, it took such a long time for more free-form role-playing to become a thing, like Powered by the Apocalypse games, for example.
I
Which
love
is
Powered
so,
by the Apocalypse.
yeah, it's such a flexible system, and it's so good for collaborative storytelling.
I love writing games in that system too.
Yeah, it's great. And I think it's also like something we touched upon recently. We do a podcast called The Beckoning, a couple of other YouTubers and I, is that we had a guest. We talked about consent in gaming, and something that people also need to get better at is to be like, is this game going to be okay for me? Is this something that I want to play? Because with all the tools we have right now to play online with people, there's going to be a lot of different games available, hopefully. And sometimes topics will be covered that you might not be familiar with, you might not be comfortable with. So it has to be a dialogue. Like, can we tone this down? How much can I give? How much can I take? This kind of talk, it didn't exist in the 90s. You had your group. These were the people you had to play with, unless you moved or there was a big city with a lot of players. So a lot of concessions were made in the 90s to be like, all right, I don't actually like these people perhaps, but these are the only ones I can play with. But today, it's so important that you find a game that you have a good time with, that you feel comfortable with. And if you want to explore intense emotional aspects, if you want to explore xenophobia, if you want to explore these things, there is a game out there. But maybe not everyone wants to play it. So communication is the key.
A lesson I learned the hard way is don't play games with people that you wouldn't want to go to the movies with.
Yeah, that's a really good rule of thumb. Yeah.
And yeah, I think now really is the time, especially with everything that's going on in the world. We're all stuck at home. I think now is the time where you can really find a good group of people to play with, as long as you can play online. because there's so many people out there, some who've played before, some who haven't, that are all seeing this and being like, wow, that's something I can do with a group of people, that I don't have to be in the same room with them, but we can still have fun and get to know people. And like, I think it's just such a great time to be a player or a storyteller, because the lake just got a lot bigger, and you don't have to constrain yourself to the people that you know now. You can go find new people. It's pretty easy. Especially if you're a storyteller, finding new players is so easy right now. There's a million of them and they're all really bored. So finding people that suit your story and who want to play with you and who get along with you, I can assure you they exist and they're there, and they also haven't left their house in 2 weeks or more. So give them something to do, please.
Yeah, and I think on the official Onyx Path Discord, there's even a channel for people looking for players, looking for storytellers. So if you're not on the Discord and you're looking for a game, come over and you will probably find someone, many someones.
Join the party.
So many someones.
Yeah, and it's just, it is, so many people are scared and worried about being a storyteller or a game master because of all the work that is involved. The amount of work involved is entirely up to you and the group. The game master could just literally be the person playing all the NPCs, or could be the one who's crafting this entire story. It's a dialogue you have to have when you have session 0. It's not like, I think a lot of people have the image of, for example, Dungeons and Dragons, where you have to craft the encounters. Not necessarily have to, but it is the more traditional way of storytelling, running a game. Whereas Powered by the Apocalypse, you're just like an input machine. Improvisation is the key to it, I think.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of the probability curve on the Powered by the Apocalypse system.
It's a little weird, yeah.
Yeah, I think it too often lands like right in that middle place, which is weird because when you look at D&D, 5% of the time you're rolling a 1 and 5% of the time you're rolling a 20, and so what's the difference? And it's a hard one for me to articulate, but I feel like it's there. Oh, I had a thought, and I totally. Oh, yeah. On Chris's point about how much work you have to do, I just ran like a session 0.5 for my Changeling game where I offloaded a lot of world building responsibility on them, and so they came up with one of the big story antagonists, and they fleshed out a lot of the city for me by me asking, like, okay, so what sort of house do you live in? Do you live with anyone else? Who are your human contacts? Who's the leader of the freehold? What kind of person are they? And so you can sort of check that episode out, or there's a lot of world building tools that you can just sort of find on Google, find through a Google search, and just run your players through a couple questions.
I think that's something that a lot of people, especially when they're new to starting out storytelling, like they think that the onus is completely on them to create this world, when really, if you're going to be playing a longer game, a lot of it is on your players as well, because what they're interested in, what they're doing, what their character has done before are all things that affect the world and grow that world, where you kind of give them a skeleton and then they go play in the skeleton, which is a weird statement, but
it's World of Darkness.
Yeah,
everyone plays in skeletons when
you play in skeletons, and then you flesh them out, and then they become people, and then they're trapped inside a person.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, that's how we do in the Midwest.
Yeah, that's the Midwest, right? Like, that's what we do.
Now I kind of want to run a game where that literally happens.
You're welcome. I'm full of weird ideas. Come at me. I got ideas for days. I have a very strange brain. But
I feel like we all have to.
I think that is kind of part of being a storyteller, is just being a little bit weird or outside of the box. You have to be able to think of something that somebody else isn't really going to think of. You have to, what's that thing that makes your game different in a way, or what's that part of the story that's like, oh, I hadn't thought of it that way before. It's a lot about, like, I don't know, taking it from a different point of view, because that's I think, in my opinion, what makes a game interesting is what's the point of view of that game? What story are you telling? Has that story been told before? Well, what's different about the way you're telling it? And I think that's the more important thing to focus on, instead of just having to create this massive world, because your players build a lot of that world for you. It's more of like, how are you driving that narrative? What pieces are you giving them? And then they kind of run with it.
Yeah, one thing I learned when I was running LARPs is that the best way to set up the plot is give the players or give the characters a problem and three separate solutions, like, or hints to three separate solutions, and they're gonna come up with the fourth one that you never saw coming.
Oh yeah.
But
For
because you
sure.
already came up with these three methods, you have a good framework for adjudicating how well solution number 4 works out.
Yeah. Yeah, like
Kitty?
a game can be like a session can be super planned out, or it can be completely improvisational. But there's really a good point that you're bringing up there, that because you made these plans, because you did the planning, doesn't matter if your plans don't come through, because you've given enough time and energy to this topic that it's now a conscious idea in your mind. Like it's very related to any kind of storytelling, or any kind of, like, when I make scripts for my videos, I automatically internalize so much of this that it becomes so easy. And I don't know where I was going to go with that, but just saying that planning is everything, the plan is nothing. I think that's the expression, that how it goes. And you're giving a great example of that, like, because you have these three options. You can also recycle everything you made. You can just name them, give them a new coat of paint, and poof, put them in another scenario. No one will.
Yeah, especially all those NPCs that they never met because they didn't go to that place. Now those NPCs live somewhere else.
So many of my NPCs are just complete improv, because like I don't expect them to do these things, and I'm like, okay, let's create a character right now.
Yeah.
I found that the few sessions that I have planned out, my players end up doing something completely different. And you can see the most dramatic example of that if you watch an episode of Paws and Claws where they infiltrate the palace, because that was when it was a boys' party. It was all of our male characters. And they had told me that, well, I knew they were all outdoor dogs. So I thought they were going to want to go camping because they'd all been complaining about how much they hated the city. And they were like, you know what? Instead of going out camping, let's pretend to be nobles and crash a party that the princess is throwing. And I was like, okay, there goes my camping scenario that I set up for you. Now I am inventing a party while I am on camera. So,
Oh no.
I know that feeling. It's like, all right, this is gonna go great.
and this is Henry, who is having
Oh, hi,
a lot of
Henry.
emotions right
Hello.
He's now the most popular person on the
baby.
stream.
now. I know.
Yeah, what a baby. I think we got like 3 more viewers as soon as he pops
Just
up.
for that.
Yeah.
Henry, you're so famous.
I basically had something like that happen, because I had given my players a piece of treasure that they found, and I expected them to be like, oh, okay, we'll try and fix this along the way. We don't need to hyper fixate on this piece of treasure, we don't know what it is. They hyper fixated for like 2 episodes, so I just had to keep creating things. I had a basic idea of what this thing was, but I wasn't expecting them to be like, we must discover this now. I'm like, I guess we're discovering this now then. I need to find ways to stall you, because I haven't actually written this out yet. I just have a vague idea of what it is.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it just turned into them like meeting a bunch of people who like claim to be experts on this thing, and them being of various validity. And it was just me creating characters for like an hour, just being like, oh, we're on stream, we're doing this now. Okay. Let me make up 3 experts on the spot.
I think that's one of the things I really like about Dungeons and Dragons, because it gives you such an easy out as a game master. Because or dungeon master, like, oh well, I'll just throw a combat encounter at them.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, if I really can't come up with anything, the door is kicked in. You're being attacked by just to get your brain going. Yeah.
The Raymond Chandler solution works for pretty much any game.
Yeah.
And you can always steal from movies. I have a friend who has a story about being in a Legend of the Five Rings game,
Mm-hmm.
that he did not realize was pretty much beat for beat an entire ripoff of the first Star Wars trilogy,
Ooh.
like the first one that they made,
Yeah.
until they were running down a very narrow ravine with the evil daimyo in like full black armor chasing them down on like this big war horse, and he's trying to like make this one little target, and like that's when it clicked, like, oh.
That was brilliant.
You can reference things pretty heavily before people realize that you're referencing them heavily, and usually by then it's too late and you've already done the reveal. Because you just reskin it and they don't notice, and then eventually they're like, wait a goddamn minute, I know this story.
No one will ever get upset at you either for
No,
doing it. They'll just feel like they're very clever.
Yeah, they'll think you're brilliant.
Yeah, they'll be like, they feel in on it because they figured it out.
Yeah, exactly.
They're not mad at you. They're just like, oh, it was this the whole
thing.
time.
I love that thing.
Good job. Yeah, you can pretty heavily reference. I find for me, like, it's just a lot of making NPC voices on the spot because I never expect them to do the thing they're doing. And I'm like, well, here's a voice. Build an entire character around this voice. And that's what I do a lot. I just do a voice I can do. And then I'm like, well, now we need a character that goes with that voice. Figure it out. Me.
Yeah. So what advice would you give to someone wanting to become a storyteller for the first time? And is that advice different whether it's meet space, online, or streaming? Take it away, Jess.
Yeah, I would say do it. I think what holds a lot of people back is fear. And so know that it's not going to be perfect. You can't plan for everything. You're going to mess up, as in, like, you might forget a rule. You might not give every player the exact equal amount of, almost said screen time, the light, when in your first session or in, like, your 500th session. But do it. It's so rewarding. Know the story you want to tell. Like, read the book, obviously. Like, know your mechanics. But assuming that you've done that and that's why you want to run the session, just don't be scared, or you can be a little bit nervous, but don't let that stop you from doing the thing that you want to do, because, you know, whatever you have to bring to the table is different than what any of us have to bring to the table. And it's worthwhile, and yeah, it's gonna be cool whatever you do, so jump in there and do it. For streaming, I don't know, I would recommend maybe not streaming your very first time, because it adds such an additional level of anxiety because you're, you know, doing something for an audience. However, maybe if you're comfortable streaming, go ahead. If you know how to, like, run OBS and have a Twitch presence or whatever, and, like, or a YouTube channel, and you love doing that, power to you. Work it out.
Yeah. Corinne, how about you?
So I would definitely agree with do the thing. Just do it. It's not as scary as it seems. It is a little scary. But on the whole, like, just be honest with your players. Let them know, hey, this is my first time running something. You know, I may make mistakes, but I just want you all to have a good time. And as long as your players are happy and having fun, you're succeeding. And by the time you get to the end, they're not going to remember the things you messed up. Like, so many people are so worried about the mistakes they made, or the things they misspoke, or the times they stuttered, or that really shitty voice they did, when really the players don't notice. They're just having a great time. They don't notice things you hyperfixate on yourself because they're busy with the story. And basically anyone I've ever talked to who's run a game for the first time, they're like really down on themselves. And it's like, no, don't be down on yourselves. Talk to your players. What do your players say? And then you talk to the players and they're like, I had the best time. Oh, do you remember that one thing? That was great. And they didn't even notice the times you messed up. Like, you are your own harshest critic. And I think that's kind of the big thing I want anybody who's going to do it to take away from it, is like, you're going to be harder than yourself than anyone else is going to be. And If you're going to run a game for the first time and it's going to be online and streamed, I did it, but I didn't. I wasn't running OBS myself. If you're going to play your first ever game and you're going to stream it and you're going to be running it, you could totally do it. But make sure somebody else is running OBS for you, because it is just way too much to run for the first time and run OBS and be like actually doing like combat and things like that. Like that's really difficult. I wouldn't have done that. But if you can get someone else to run OBS for you, or if you can get somebody else to like help you run a combat, or as long as you have a little bit of help, do it. If you feel comfortable streaming and you want to stream your first ever time running a game, you do you, boo. I think that you can, it's what makes you happy. And I did it because I was encouraged to, and someone was going to help me. But in general, if you don't have help, I probably don't recommend it. It's just a lot of things to pay attention to.
Yeah, when I first started my Changeling game, I was the one also running the Twitch software, because I'm like, oh, it's my game, I should take responsibility for it. And that's how I learned that the OBS makes my computer overheat and shut down after about an hour into a 2-hour game.
Oh no.
That sucks.
Yeah,
tech issues are real.
Yeah,
tech happens. Yeah.
I offloaded tech to one of my players who has a much better computer, and just knowing that someone else has this handled is so much stress off of me. So, Chris.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff has already been said, and I'd like to tie into what Karin said about the whole streaming thing. First of all, I think it's very important to know why you're streaming. Are you streaming because you also want to share the amazing fun you have with potentially other viewers? That's perfectly fine. Are you streaming because you want to get famous from it? That's not a very good... You're going to get disappointed. It can be a good reason, absolutely, but I feel like actual plays are approaching the level of Let's Plays in how many there are. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. You can still stand out. You can still definitely make it out there, but that should not... I don't think that should be your motivation, because it can lead to a lot of frustration, with yourself, with your performance, with your players. And if you're just starting out, you are going to feel like garbage if you feel like you screwed up. Like you said, you hyperfixate on something, and that will ruin your entire evening. That being said, I actually strongly recommend watching other famous streamers, not because they're famous and amazing, because that's going to be disheartening, but rather look at them and see how are they doing things. Put on your studying glasses and be like, how is Matt Mercer doing voices? How is Jason Carl paying attention to his players? Like, look at them, consider them as something to learn from rather than something to compare yourself to, because that's unfair to you and it's unfair to your players.
I watched a lot of Little Brook when preparing for my game.
Thank you. That's super flattering. I'm very glad that you did that. I've learned so much through Little Brook as well. Streaming regularly really teaches you how to manage a bigger group quicker. But I think I wouldn't recommend streaming for the first time you're storytelling, running a game, because I think it can easily also lead to a situation that you're not prepared for. It's something we touched upon earlier, that stress, triggering stuff, all that stuff is multiplied 1,000 when you're aware that there are people watching you, and that can be difficult for you and for the players. One thing said wrong, one implication that wasn't intended, and it can easily spiral out of control. That being said, I think you should do it. I think you should run a game. It is not as hard as you think it is. Expect help from your players. Tell them that this is not a one-man show or a one-person show. This is a collaborative effort. They need to back you up. And as you have touched upon, they can help you with everything from map making to running the tech to creating the world. They will feel more included. If they're all up against the bad guy that they created, they will have much more at stake than if it's some rando that you created.
I really agree with all the advice given here. Just jump in with both feet. Just do it. Feel happy about it. Forgive yourself, because even Matt Mercer gets the rules wrong sometimes on his stream.
Yep.
And it's fine because there's a lot of rules, and you don't want to pause a stream to go check the books and look something up. Um, I guess my practical advice would be don't worry about fleshing out every single corner of the world, because you're not going to use all that. Give your players three problems, three allies, three enemies, and three places of interest. And no matter what they want to do, you'll be able to work one of those into the story somehow. And also, players come to the table expecting to have fun. And so you really have to try hard to disappoint them. And so
Hmm.
as long as you're listening to them and as long as you're in tune with each other, everyone's going to have a great time.
Yeah, and tagging off of what both you and Christian said about watching other like famous GMs or DMs, if you can find a video of somebody, and they might not even have to be famous, running the game that you're about to play, that can be so helpful if you haven't played it, especially just to see, or even if you have played it, just to see how it's run. If you've played it, how it's different when someone else runs it than from when you were a player playing it, because sometimes books are confusing and
Yep.
you don't really know how a game works until you are playing it, and watching somebody else play it can clarify a lot of things where you might be like, oh, now I understand leveling up, or oh, that's how that combat thing works, I did not get that. So that can be really helpful.
Okay, so we have a question from Eben Rook. Do storytellers need to have been regular players first? What do you think about that, Jess?
I think they commonly are, but there's no reason for them to have to be. I don't. I mean, I know a lot of people who just buy RPGs because they like to read them. And if you are that person and you're inspired and want to become a storyteller, get some people together and run a game.
I think that's basically where I fall on it too. I think a lot of the time, maybe not most of the time, people are regular players first before they jump into storytelling, because usually, at least a reason why a lot of people do is because they can't find someone to run a game for them. So they're like, well, I guess I'm running the game now. And that's kind of how you get into it. But you definitely don't have to be. Some people just like have that storytelling bone in their body and they're like, I don't need to play this. I just want to run it. And if that's you, go right ahead. Maybe definitely make sure you talk to your players and things like that. Like, know the kind of game they want to play, especially if you don't have much reference for playing in a game like that. But you should be doing that anyway. So it doesn't really change that much. You're just starting from a different frame of reference, which is fine.
Chris?
Yeah, I think it really matters for kind of a personality, what kind of requirements you feel like you have. I think it's a good experience because knowing how it is to be a player can really help temper the way you run your game. But it's really not a necessity. And sometimes it's not even an option, unfortunately, depending on where you are, which game it is, and what people you can gather together to play. But yeah, I see no problem with never having played the game before if you're a storyteller or a game master running it. But I don't think it's a bad experience to have been a player at first. And I think it also helps someone who's new to role playing to come out of their shell, so to speak, and get used to it. Because as a storyteller or game master, you are role playing a whole lot more, I would say, than players do, because you're playing all these different characters. So being used to role playing is definitely a plus, but that can also be learned in theater. So yeah.
I sort of agree. I think it's good to start as a player because you get a handle on the themes of the game, on the mechanics, on how stories go. And I think that can be helpful, but it's not mandatory. So, like, there's sort of this idea that you start as a player and you graduate to storyteller. And I think that's something we inherited from early D&D. that, along with Thaco, we can just sort of get rid of. Yeah, I would say if you are running a game that you have not played, you do need to pay closer attention to all the little fiddly bits and the mechanics. Even if you haven't played, make a couple characters. Just because the character generation system gives you a lot of insight on how the mechanics are going to go. And so if you've already gone through the character generation process, you know what your players have been through, and you have a really solid idea of what the system can do and when it's time to roll dice and all that fun stuff. And so Deacon Ket asks a variation of that question. What about previous face-to-face first time entering the fray of online play? Which I guess means if you've been running meat space games for a long time and now you want to graduate to running online or streaming, what advice do you have? So, Jess?
I think kind of what we said before a little bit about, establishing why you want to stream and talking to your players about how much they want it to be a game versus a show, what combination thereof, and knowing the tech or knowing that you have a player or a buddy who can run tech for you. Because I think for a lot of us, the biggest thing keeping us from doing it is not knowing OBS or not knowing how to make a layout, or just that it's a barrier, honestly. So finding a way to cross that barrier is helpful, or is going to be the biggest. I'm going to mix metaphors. Getting over that hurdle is going to be the biggest way to do it. I had something kind of neat with my with the Paws and Claws game, because one of the players in that is one of my regular players in a home game who had never streamed before and was super nervous. He plays Snowball. Well, he played Snowball. Now he's playing Mr. Tibbles because he got promoted at work and had to leave the game, but now he's quarantined, so he's back. So, but he was nervous playing with like professional role players, and we're like, no, we're not. They're just people who have webcams.
Professional is a strange term.
Professional,
right?
Yeah, we're not making money off this.
No.
Very, very few people do.
Yeah, and he's one of the only players who got like fan art, and so we're like, so you are the
so
professional
jealous
role player. So yeah, that was definitely a face-to-face player becoming a streaming player, and yeah, that's my thing.
Corinne.
So I think it kind of depends for which we're going with. First, I'll go with online, and then I'll go with streaming. I think switching to playing online right now is something that a lot of people are doing because their regular games can't meet. And I think there are just like a ton of resources to help you do that. On the whole, I think one of the first things to learn is learn how to use a virtual tabletop. There are many different ones. Personally, I prefer Roll20, just because it's the first one I used, and first one you use, you kind of get used to it. And it seems scarier than it is. You are allowed to learn on the job, just get a basic idea of how to work it and go from there. You can learn more fancy stuff the more you go. But right now, so many resources are completely available for you to use. And, you can always find someone who can help you. There's plenty of groups that have people who are happy to teach. I know Roll the Roll, we're happy to teach you how to use a virtual tabletop. We're happy to teach you how to stream. Like, we want to help you do the thing you want to do, because more people in the gaming space is always a good thing. It just, it broadens the ability of people to play. And I think that's really important. So I think basically the main thing is just, you have to learn how to use the stuff to do it. And that can seem really scary, but it's not as scary as it seems. Once you get going, once you find someone who can help you, or, you know, find even just a basic tutorial, which I'm sure exists, you are able to take it from there. And it's okay if you make mistakes. I think that's probably my biggest mantra. It's like, make mistakes. You'll be okay. You'll learn from it. It's fine. Your players will understand.
Yeah. You learn more than if you succeed.
Exactly.
For sure, for sure.
You learn so much more from making a mistake than you do just from doing it exactly right the first time. You know, and sometimes you make a funny mistake and your players like that even more. Like, oh, I was trying to use dynamic lighting and now we can't get in this room because we can't see anything because of this door.
Oh God, Roll20 and dynamic lighting. Oh.
Yeah, like you can really mess some things up with dynamic lighting.
I had a 40-minute discussion of whether or not the shadows were 3D or 2D with a player. And they're like, oh, I'm like, no, they're 2D.
I don't even use Roll20. I feel like I'm missing out on so much fun. We just roll actual dice.
I do personally recommend Roll20. I just because it was the first one I used, and I think it works great. It's a good way to do maps, and you have the character sheets there, and you know, it's great for me the way I learned to run, because I basically learned to run on it instead of, you know, playing in person first, which I think maybe I have a different learning curve than a lot of people. But yeah, it's nice for some things. Other things are a bear. And, you know, that's technology, though. Some things are great, some things aren't. You kind of have to just roll with the punches. In regards to streaming for the first time, if you're switching to streaming, you know, I think it is very important to know why you're streaming a game. Like, why have you decided to stream it? Are you streaming it because, you know, you think you have a really interesting story to tell? Or are you streaming it because you want, like, chat participation? Or are you streaming it so people you know can watch? You know, maybe you want to share it with your friends. You know, things like that. Those are all completely valid reasons to want to stream. But I think it's really important to know what that reason is going in. And then know that you're going to have tech issues. Just accept it. It's okay. It happens. Audio issues are like the bane of my existence, but they happen all the time. And no matter how long you've been doing it's going to happen. Things are going to mess up. OBS is going to update and ruin everything. And then you'll have to figure it out on the fly right as your stream's supposed to start.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah, like it just happens. And I think that, you know, basically accept that things are going to go wrong, because it'll work out in the end and people won't really care that much. Like, they understand. They know that things go wrong. And so just try to be less anxious about it, I think, is, as someone with anxiety, hard for me to do, but yeah.
On the topic of Roll20, I found that they actually sell entire pre-made adventures for Dungeons & Dragons, the official ones, like Storm King's Thunder, for example. Very, very useful if you're running one of those games, because they give you all the maps, all the fights, everything like that. Roll20 is a very powerful tool. I use it a lot. I would say that there's a big difference between going from just playing online with your friends to streaming online with your friends, even if you're already an established group. A lot of people, even if they're good role players, are not comfortable acting in front of people they don't know. This is something you have to talk with your players about. You can't force them to it. And even if they're okay with it, it's going to take a while before everyone gets used to it. Everyone's going to be a little bit awkward, a little bit stiff. Everyone has their own mileage on how long it takes before they get comfortable with it, if they ever do. That being said, I think that playing online for many right now is the only option they have. I personally have a friend who opted out of our real-life flesh-based campaign because he's not comfortable being over microphone or on camera. He doesn't feel like it's okay. And we're fine with that. We're starting another campaign right now. We'll get back to the other one when we do. But it's super important that communication is going on. Thankfully, we have all these tools. We have cameras, we have Roll20, stuff like that. Imagine how it would have been if this happened in 2005. It would have been the worst. So we should be thankful for that. And just like has been said many times, I'll say it again, why are you streaming? Figure that out first. If you're comfortable and okay with the fact that maybe no one will be watching for a long time, go right ahead. You might be lucky, you might get 15 people watching your first game. If you're like, I would say most games I've run for the beginning online, this is hardly my first time playing a stream game, 2 or 3 people at most watching. and one of them being semi-active. That's perfectly normal, especially if you're not a big name fan or if you're not famous otherwise. And I mean, Critical Role, they've been playing for 2 years before they took it to the camera. Always keep that in mind. These are people who have been playing the same characters for 2 years. That's why they had a good dynamic from the get-go.
Yeah.
And they were also famous voice actors, so that.
Yeah, that
don't
helps.
compare yourself to them. It's
Yes.
fine. Yeah.
Take it all with a grain of salt. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
They're not just starting out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I agree, especially with Kieran's point about there will be gremlins. There will be gremlins, and
For sure.
don't let it ruin your day or your stream, because if someone hates your game because OBS updated and ruined everything, like, you can't please everybody. And I hope that most players and most viewers, most audience members, are forgiving, because they have had gremlins too, and we understand. And I personally use Fantasy Grounds. It's a little expensive. I had it on my Steam wishlist for years before it went on sale. Learning curve is a bit high, but I feel like once you master it, it's a little more flexible. And I've played games without virtual tabletops, so don't feel like you have to get the software or you have to understand how to do it. But if you are playing without a virtual tabletop, you're going to have to get a lot more comfortable with narration, because you won't have the battle mats, you won't have the visuals. It's going to be a lot more difficult, because I am a storyteller who loves handouts. I love them. And it's really difficult to replicate that online, especially if you're streaming. So, how do you show your audience the letter? Do you screen share? Because that's tech issues there as well.
Do what I do, just hold it in front of the camera.
Yeah.
Like, this is the map for today.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, and you can always put a link in the chat, but not everybody watches a game as they stream. Sometimes they watch later. And so I feel like that's one of the bigger at least for me, for doing the streaming game. And I still haven't found a solution that I'm perfectly happy with. So if you can't, don't feel bad.
I agree.
Yeah. And so we are running up on our 2 hours. So I feel like that was probably our last question. And I want to thank everybody who asked us really, really cool, insightful questions. And thank you all for coming here, for being here, for saying really fun, insightful, and helpful things. And I think we should probably just sign off by telling people where to find us on social media on the Onyx Path channel. So starting with Jess.
Hi, I'm Jess. I'm a social worker by day, and I write games and supplements by night. You can find me on Twitter at miss_Jess03, on Twitch at Angry Nerd Girl. And you can see me here on the Onyx Path on Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Eastern for Paws and Claws, Lost Tales of Pugmire. And on Angry Nerd Girl every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern for Three Flings, three tieflings venturing through the Uncaged Anthology.
Nice. Corinne.
First, I just have to say, I love the name Three Flings so much.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm gonna check that out.
That's so great. I just love it. I'm Corinne. You can find me at Manic Pixie Girl on Twitter. You can see that on the screen. My game for the Onyx Path is Purge of the Serpent Wolves, which is on Saturdays 6 to 8 Central or Eastern currently, which is 5 to 7 Central. We may be starting an hour earlier soon, just because my players need more time. If so, take that into account. But this week would still be 6 to 8 Eastern. And then that is a Scarred Lands game. So if you're into Scarred Lands or don't know what it is, come check us out. As for the rest, generally speaking, you can find me on Roll the Roll, where I play in games. Sometimes I run games. I make all the graphics and things. So come check us out. We play lots of games, mainly Pathfinder 2e right now, and D&D 5e. But yeah, if you haven't checked out Pathfinder 2e, we do a lot of cool stuff with that. So come check it out.
And Chris?
Yes, Chris, I am a teacher by day. I run my channel, The Primogen, by night. You will find me tomorrow here at 4 p.m. where I will be running Changeling the Lost Little Brook Reunion, which is it's taken interesting turns lately. I do lore videos, like I said, on mostly vampire, but some werewolf stuff and stuff like that. And I do those every Tuesday and Wednesday. And I will occasionally be streaming on my YouTube channel as well every second or third Sunday, doing some campaign creation if you're into that. And this has been an absolute blast. This was a Wednesday evening well spent for me.
Awesome. Glad to hear it. So I'm Rachel. You can find me at Stolen Fire pretty much everywhere. You can find me on this channel Thursday evenings, depending on where you are in the world, from 9:30 to 11:30 Eastern Standard Time, running Changeling the Dreaming, because I guess we've decided that Thursday is Changeling Day on this channel.
Great decision. Best decision the Onyx Path ever made, I believe.
Yeah. Other than that, I am a freelancer, and so you can find my work in a lot of Onyx Path stuff. I worked on New Blood, the V5 introductory adventure, and I've got a bunch of stuff coming out. Oh, and I am in a Scarred Lands game that runs first, third, and fifth Wednesdays. So we are not running this evening, but we are running next week. It's a new campaign. I'm playing a rat person druid. It's exciting.
Watch and play Scarred Lands. It's very cool.
Yeah. I'm really getting into this setting. It's a lot of fun.
It's very metal and very like it's a like a grim bright. Like it's a scary world, but the players are kind of the light in the darkness, which I think is a very cool.
Yes.
I wrote a bunch of NPC pirates for Scarred Lands that you can get at the Slurration Vault, so check them out. They're fun to have in your party. It's dangerous.
Yes,
to go
I also
alone.
have stuff up on Storytellers Vault, some of which is currently pay what you want, in case you are a new aspiring current GM looking for content. Committed to Darkness, it's a bunch of antagonists for Vampire the Requiem, and Forgotten Corners of the Earth, a listing of lost cairns for Werewolf 20th Anniversary.
Awesome.
I think that's it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for joining us, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Have
And
a
thank you
good
for the
day.
lovely chat.
Yeah, it was a great talk. I'm very happy about this.
Mwah. Enjoy your day.
Bye, everyone. Stay safe. Wash your hands.
Bye. Yeah, wash your
Bye.
hands.
Stay healthy.
Stay inside.